Here we are with the Vintage Wisdom Oracle deck. So I'm going to be giving you a review, my impression of this deck. I've been using it, for a couple months now, actually. Yeah, my reviews tend to be short and about my experience with the deck. My reviews are not as extensive as some people's, and I would encourage you to go ahead and do a search for Vintage Wisdom Oracle deck on YouTube if you want to see presentations of all the cards or other people's impressions. So here's the box that it comes in. Very sturdy box, very good for housing the cards for a long time to come. This standard playing card deck is just here so you can compare the size. So they're fairly large cards, and these are just examples of the cards. And if anybody's curious about my pointer here, it's just a piece of crabapple tree that I trimmed off and just seemed like appropriate for this use. I love this deck, but and it's funny because to me it has a very strong personality. This deck has a strong personality. When I'm shuffling it, when I'm working with it, I think of it either as the sisters, or so I'll talk to them and I'll say, sisters, let me know. Give me your feedback for this clearance. And so I think of them as the sisters. I also think of them as sometimes they give readings that are like snarky aunts, maiden aunts, as in your mother or brother's sister. And it's just like, well, I don't know why you didn't see this. Here is the obvious answer. So I feel like I get readings from this deck that are kind of like that sometimes. But I also get very compassionate, very helpful readings from this deck. So it's all, female imagery. I think there are one or two males that make appearances. One is a child. When I first got the deck, I kind of sorted it according to, you see, some of them are like this New Beginnings. You have no particular landscape involved. And here you have an interior scene. And so I kind of, when I started working with these cards, I kind of sorted them. This is another where you have a man-made structure. Many of them you don't. Okay, you have a lot of flowery images, but most of them show individual women. Here you have two, the kindred spirits. So just to kind of get a feel for it, I divided it in a variety of ways. The borders also have slightly different colorations, but I couldn't perceive any kind of suit. There are no suits to speak of that I could detect. There are no numbers on the cards, so that makes them a little different than a lot of decks. And so the guidebook itself is actually alphabetical. It goes alphabetically. What else do I want to say? I do find the guidebook useful, but I tend not to be too slavish when it comes with Oracle decks. Anyway, when it comes to guidebooks, and if I feel like I have a different perception of a card, by golly, that's what I'll go with. For instance, the guidebook was helpful here because I was not honing in on the fact that there are two bottles, kind of two options going on there, and so that was, the guidebook kind of stressed that, some decisions in terms of the healing. So if you get the guidebook, it tells about how this deck was created. There, obviously, vintage is in the name. There's a strong vintage feel, and these were inspired and in part created with vintage postcards. So let me show you the guidebook. It's not very thick. Okay, it's not very thick. Again, I don't feel like I need them too much. You know, here's abundance. So to me that's more than enough. Okay, for this. I will say this. I didn't show you an example of the backing. Let me pop one in there. And I'll give you a close-up as well. Okay, so this is an example of the backing down here, and here's a close-up of the backing. Alright, so this is a deck that is not intended to be used with reversals, which I think is unfortunate. I do use reversals. I try to ignore the backing as I'm shuffling, and I do use reversals. And I just take them to be delays. The guidebook does not provide anything in the way of guidance for reversals. But if you've worked with cards for a while, you really don't need that. You don't need that guidance. You can bring your own interpretation to a reversal as you are familiar with the cards, as you get familiar with the cards. Something that can be a little bit problematic is a lot of the cards, although they're each distinct, but there can be a lot of similarities between them. Because they're from a lot of them are from the same era, and so there's just a lot of similarities, a lot of flowery Victorian-looking stuff, a lot of the same dresses. There's more than one that features Matahari, and in particular, looking sensual and in a natural environment. But they are by no means all the same. They do have personality, and then you have the keywords. Okay, so let's look at some of the cards. Okay, so again, here's one that is not at all flowery. Shadow Self. Again, you have the structure. It is a ruin. Okay, so she's examining a ruin, and she's looking up towards the what looks like a crow. And so, you know, and here's good old Matahari again in her belly dancing, exotic dancing outfit, very similar to the card I was just pointing out right here. Okay, so that card down there is nature. This one is grace. Okay, so very similar. But here's one that's very different. And again, I think this is a Matahari, very different. Protection. The swans being the protection here. Okay, she uses some Waterhouse images in her cards. Of course, who doesn't love Waterhouse, right? Okay, intention, focus. Wonderful. Here's another one where the image, the woman is kind of floating up. Okay. Wonderful truth card. Facing yourself. Okay. Faith. Surrender. Thought. Balance. Okay. So there's there is a variety of images. I think I don't know that I have used this deck for a general reading yet. It's usually a specific question. Not sure that I have anything else to add. It's a deck I'm still exploring. I've had some good, accurate readings with it with other people. And I always thank them. And I think of them as the sisters. Consulting the sisters. Alright, that's it for the Vintage Wisdom Oracle deck.